I met you about 20 years ago when I showed up for the first day of your course. And when you greeted the class, you stood in front of the class and just stared at us, if you remember. It was
Yes.
probably a good 45 seconds or so. And it it was intimidating as hell. Why did you start your class that way?
Uh, First of all, I wanted to bring home graphically to members of the class how uncomfortable they are with silence. Whenever there is silence, you always want to rush in to fill it. And I wanted them to experience for themselves that interregnum between meeting someone and conversation taking place. The second thing is we have an unfortunate tendency to pass judgment on people and stick labels on them. And the biggest single means or mechanism we use for making these judgments is sight. And the second biggest is sound. And I was depriving them of sound because I was simply sitting there or standing there staring at them. So I wanted to see how long it would take before someone found it so uncomfortable that he or she had to chip in. So
It was kind of like being welcomed by Morpheus into the
yeah,
Matrix, getting the red pill option, and we took the red pill.
yes,
So, why do you think people are so uncomfortable with silence?
because silence forces you to be with yourself. If you look at the way most people live their lives, they will do anything not to confront their inner silence. Think about how many times you turn on a television set, not because there's something out there you really want to see, but simply because you have to have something to distract you to occupy your mind.
Mm-hmm.
We built an entire multi-billion-dollar industry devoted to keeping you occupied, keeping your mind occupied, to prevent you from being with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Say more about that. So, when you are with yourself,
When you are
why?
with yourself, sometimes you might wonder, who am I? And that, I think, is one of the most profound questions you can ever ask yourself. Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
We tend to define ourselves by the roles we play. You know, I work for such and such a company. I'm a wife, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a daughter. You define yourself by your accomplishments at your place of work, in your uh, other outside work activities, in your endeavors. You define yourself by physical type, by gender, by nationality, by race. And what I would like to suggest to people who take CPM is that these are all the outer accoutrements. They're like a suit of clothes. You wear it, you put it down. Who are you underneath within that suit of clothes? That's the question that I would like people to grapple with, because in the process of grappling with that, they will discover that there is a tremendous freedom. What I would like is for persons who take my program to be anchored in the knowledge that I am okay. I have always been okay. I will always be okay. In fact, I cannot not be okay. As long as I'm in the human condition, stuff will happen. There will be serious illness and death. There will be career setbacks. There will be financial reverses. There will be relationship problems. As and when these arise, I will deal with them as appropriate, but I will deal with them from the space of I am okay. I have always been okay. I will always be okay. In fact, I cannot not be okay. And it is possible to be anchored in that. And this is not a belief, it is first-hand, direct experience and knowledge, not a belief.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to take, it's a long journey, but that's the journey that I would like everyone who takes my program to go.
If we're bombarded all the time with advertisements and through the media, whenever we turn on the screen, how do you practically tell people to escape all that clutter that infests their minds to discover who they really are?
I don't tell them to escape because, frankly, I think that escape is impossible in this society structured the way it is. But you can escape without trying to escape by simply becoming aware of what is happening. If you look at advertising, for example, the overwhelming majority of all advertising is devoted to telling you that you're not good enough. And what
Mhm.
you really need in order to be happy, fulfilled, excited is for X, whatever X is, whether it's insurance, whether it's a new pair of sneakers, whether it's a brand new automobile, whatever, you have this, or whether it's mustard.
Mhm.
I still remember that
And
wonderful sequence of advertisements for Grey Poupon where you have people in Cadillacs or other expensive cars coming up next to each other and sharing Grey Poupon mustard. All of those are designed to say, this is what you need in order to be full, complete, happy. And that's a
Mhm.
myth. But because we're bombarded by it all the time, we tend to believe it. And the purpose of my course is to get you to recognize that this is happening to you, because when you recognize that it is happening to you, that is the first step towards freeing yourself from the tentacles of mass thought.
Mhm. And so, day to day, what do you do to free yourself from the tentacles of mass thought?
I am more aware of the ways in which the system manipulates us because I've spent, decades thinking about it.
Mhm.
This doesn't mean that I don't get manipulated. I can have countless instances where I can see that I have been, but at least I'm more aware of it and much less prone to being led away from where I would like to be. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It just means it happens less.
And when you do get led away, what are some of the more powerful exercises or things you do to ground yourself or regain that confidence and comfort in who you are?
There are two things that I do. I deliberately immerse myself in books and increasingly of late audio tapes of people who point out the conditioning that's happening to us. I'll be happy to share some of these with you and your listeners.
Mhm.
And the other thing that I do is simply meditate on where I would like to be and am I really on the right path towards getting there? Frequently, the answer is no. And then I make a slight course correction and I'm on the right path for a short time, could be as little as 5 minutes, could be as long as a day. And then I have to course correct already.
Yeah, I'd love to hear some of these books. It's incredible because 100 years ago, the wealthiest kings in the world couldn't listen to fantastic musicians unless they had them playing live in front of them. And now
Correct.
we just hit a button and we're exposed to the finest sounds in the history of the world. Same with a book, right? Maybe we take for granted how we can access these incredible masters. Who are some of the masters you turn to?
Oh, there was an Indian sage called Ramana Maharshi who has had a profound influence on my life. There was a Jesuit priest called Anthony de Mello, likewise. Ram Dass, of course, is one of the most powerful figures to emerge from the counterculture of the 60s and 70s, and he had a profound influence on me.
I remember back when I took your program, you asked the question, what causes happiness? And we all guessed wrong.
Hmm.
And the answer you gave us floored me. I've spent probably the last 18 years testing it empirically in the real world, and it holds water. You want to share thoughts on that?
Absolutely. We all believe that there is something which brings us happiness. We can get happiness. And typically, when I'm speaking to an audience and ask, what do you need to get to be happy? They come up with dozens of answers. Generally put two of them on the screen immediately, and those two are vast wealth and trophy spouse because they are the 800-pound gorillas in the room, and I save myself a lot of time by getting them out first. But there's a whole bunch of things: bigger house, exotic vacations, constructive leisure time, good friends, whole bunch of things. And the notion is that if I get these, then I will be happy. That's all based on the model that I have to get something so I can do something so I can be something. So I have to get a great deal of money so I can go to exotic places on vacation so I can be happy. I have to be in a relationship so I can have great sex so I can be happy. They're all what I would call the if then model. If this happens, then I will be happy. And the if then model is broken. It's flat out wrong. It doesn't work. But we think it works, and we invest enormous amounts of energy in trying to make it work. And that's how we actually, in a very real sense, learn to be unhappy, because we believe in a model which is demonstrably false. And I'll demonstrate it's false in two ways. First of all, think back on your life. Can you recall in your life something that you really wanted and you got it?
Just
And
this
what
morning.
happened? You were thrilled for a day, a week, and then it simply became part of the background of your life and you moved on to wanting something else. We always want something else. We want our life to be different in some way. We want to be 10 pounds lighter. We want to be 10 miles per hour faster when we jog. We want to have a bigger car. We want to be a better driver of that bigger car. Or better still, we want to have a more experienced chauffeur for that bigger car. We're always wanting something. And the notion is that when I get it, I will be happy or happier. But that's not so. And I can prove it to you. Think back to some time in your life when you were confronted with a scene of such spectacular beauty that it took you outside of yourself to a place of great calm and serenity. Can you do that? Everybody can. You all remember, maybe it was the tumultuous ocean, maybe it was the mountain, snow-covered mountaintop, a beautiful valley. Why did you feel that sense of peace, of serenity, of overwhelming I'm okayness? That's because somehow at that instant you accepted the universe exactly as it was. You didn't want it to be different. You didn't say that's a beautiful rainbow, but it's too far to one side. If I could move it 200 yards to the right, it would be so much better. You didn't say that's a beautiful valley, but you know the tree in the foreground? It has too many crooked branches, and you give me a chainsaw in 20 minutes and I'll fix it. No, the off-center rainbow was fine. The tree with the crooked branches was perfect. And the moment you accepted it, you didn't have to do anything to experience the fullness, the joy that is inherent in you. It rose up to envelop you. And I'm suggesting that your life right now, with all of the problems you have, more precisely, your life right now, with all of the problems you think you have, is every bit as perfect. But you're trying and striving with might and main to change one or more aspects of it. No, not this way. This is the way it's got to be. And in that resistance, in that rejection, you buy into the if-then model, and that is flawed. That's how we learn to be unhappy. Why is it that you believe life has to go a certain way instead of the way it's going? What makes you say, I'm not going to be okay if life goes this way. It has to go my way. Why should it? When you start thinking along those lines, all of a sudden your worldview of the universe changes. And you just might find that that is a heck of a lot more peaceful, more joyful. And paradoxically, you might accomplish more by going that route than the route that you're presently following. In my course, I want people to discover that for themselves.
So on the one hand, there's striving mightily. On the other, there's accepting whatever comes. If you take a book, one of those you pointed me to, The Surrender Experiment, the author talks about dropping his preferences. I don't see that as necessary, actually helpful or even practical. it seems like striving mightily reflects a preference for a certain way. And actually, you can still accept what comes.
Yes.
Do you
The
do
two are
you
not
find that,
paradoxical. The two are
yeah,
not contradiction to each other. You
they
can do
don't,
both. In
yeah,
fact, you should do both.
yeah. Do you find that there are certain things you can do while striving mightily to also accept what comes?
Let me tell you a story. This is one of Ram Dass's favorite story, and it talked about the United Nations effort to eradicate smallpox. And there were only a very few spots left. And one of those was in a remote region of India, where the villagers believed that smallpox was a gift from the goddess. And they resisted attempts to vaccinate or inoculate. So there was a military SWAT style operation launched, and paramilitary forces raided the village in the early hours of the in the early hours of the morning, immobilized all the males, and then the doctors swooped down and vaccinated everybody. And then they released the villagers, and the lead doctor was, somewhat apprehensive. And the headman of the village walked into his hut, came out with a watermelon and sliced it open and offered the fruit to the doctors. And he was very taken aback. He said, "Hey, why did you do that? Here we came and we've done gross violence to your physical bodies, and we have violated your beliefs. And why are you offering us fruit?" And the headman says it was our dharma, duty, to resist you because we believe that the disease, smallpox, is a gift of the goddess. It was your dharma to vaccinate us because you don't believe that. And today, for whatever reason, your gods were stronger than our gods, and we failed. But now that is over, and you are a guest in our village, and our dharma is to treat our guests well and feed them. So I'm doing that. It's a very instructive parable because it does talk about, yes, you will try your level best. Whether you succeed in your objective is totally beyond your control. And if you succeed, fantastic. If you do not succeed, fantastic. It does not have to have any bearing at all on your mental, emotional, and other well-being.
Mm-hmm.
If you recognize that, what you're doing is you're severing the if-then link. And that is the way to unlock tremendous joy in your life. And paradoxically, that's also the way to unlock immense productivity in your life. You have a vision of the world. As long as you have a vision of the world, it is incumbent upon you to try your level best to achieve it. It is incumbent upon you. It is required. You strive. You may succeed, you may not succeed. It does not have anything to do with your well-being unless you mistakenly, unless you erroneously decide it has to. So yes, your life is going a particular way. The universe is unfolding as it is, and you might want to make it unfold a different way, and you try. But if it doesn't, you're fine with that. Here
Mm-hmm.
is the mistake most of us make, Josh. We think that the benefit of setting a goal and trying mightily to reach the goal is reaching the goal. Wrong. The benefit of setting a goal and trying mightily to reach the goal is the learning and growth that happen in us and to us as we try our level best to achieve the goal. If we actually achieve the goal, fantastic. That is a bonus. If you don't achieve the goal, the learning and growth have already happened, so you're ahead of the game. It's a no-lose proposition.
This is one of the most powerful realizations I've ever had. You know, my world is entrepreneurs. And we often wonder, despite all the masochism we invite into our world, why more people aren't entrepreneurs. It's so rewarding. And then you realize when you administer personality tests to your team, well, people just have different innate preferences, right? They're just not born entrepreneurs. But when it comes to self-awareness and the kind of thing you just spoke about, this realization, this degree of acceptance, whatever the outcome may be, why do you think people have such different levels of self-awareness or even intentness on gaining self-awareness? On Unlike entrepreneurship, it doesn't seem like one of those things where there would necessarily be an innate personality bias away from gaining self-awareness.
I'm not sure I can answer that question, Josh. The closest I can come to it is that as a society, we are constantly bombarded with contrary messages. I have to go out. I have to strive. It is under my control. Look out for number one. You can achieve anything. All you have to do is work hard and come up with different creative ways of achieving it. And you know you can achieve anything. And it is the achieving that is portrayed as your success and your fulfillment. We are constantly brainwashed into thinking that we succeed when we have it, whatever it is, more money, more prestige, hierarchical position, power. When we have it, then we will be happy. We have succeeded, we have arrived.
Mhm.
Very rarely do we talk about who are you being rather than what are you doing, what are you achieving, what are you acquiring, what do you have. And I would suggest that who you are being is much, much more important to your well-being than what you're doing and what you're acquiring and what you have.
Your program was never about making tons of money.
There are a number of people who have taken it
Yeah.
who have, in fact, made tons of money.
What would you say your course at its essence is about? I mean, you spoke about the immense power of the human mind and its ability to mobilize creativity towards certain ends and discovering whether those ends are even worthwhile.
Mhm.
But a lot of that conjures up ideas of, well, how can I make more money? How can I get rich? Right? Because I took it in a business school and that was on so many people's minds.
Mhm.
But we discovered eventually there's something much richer to get out of the program. At essence, what do you think people want to get out of your program?
I can't answer for what people want to get out of the program because it is a business school and many people come in and they are driven by that, sheer ambition that infects almost everyone at business school to some extent or the other. But the persons who take my program self-select and they recognize that there is more to human life and human existence than the pure pursuit of money. And what I would like them to think about, am I this day radiantly alive? Does my blood sing at the thought of being who I am and doing what I do? Does my blood sing at the thought of being who I am and doing what I do? Can I fall to my knees in involuntary gratitude at the tremendous good fortune that has been bestowed on me? And I would like persons to enjoy the sheer joy of being fulfilled right now, not fulfilled when something happens, but fulfilled right now, fulfilled as they're doing things, and not when the objective of what they're doing is attained, if it is attained. That is possible. It requires a completely different mindset and a different understanding of how things work. And that's the model that I would like to have persons adopt. And adopt not because somebody tells them that, but because they have tested it and find it's a superior model. I don't want you to believe anything I say. I want you to go out and think about it and try it out and see if it works for you better than what you're currently using. And that's always been my approach in all of my courses.
What's a mental model that you'd invite someone to consider to understand how profoundly a different mental model can shape your life?
Well, we talked about it earlier today. A mental model we have is, if I get this, I will be happy.
Mhm.
If I get a bigger house, if I have a more beautiful spouse, if I have a kid who studies hard and gets into Harvard. All of these are mental models. If I do that, then I will be happy or happier. And I invite them to think about it and think about their own life and say, is this necessarily true? What did happen? And you'll find that when all of these things happened, if they did, and they felt thrilled, it vanished. Obviously, that wasn't the thing that gave them lasting happiness. And if it didn't give them lasting happiness, is it possible that perhaps their model was faulty?
You talk a fair amount about happiness. Naturally, a lot of people come to you and they want more happiness.
Mhm.
But actually, as soon as I took my focus off happiness and put it more on virtue and principles, happiness seemed to emerge as a very natural byproduct.
Correct.
Is happiness something people shouldn't be focused on?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I would go so far as to say that if anyone ever asks the question, am I happy? He or she is not. Persons who are truly happy never even bother asking that question because happiness is not something you pursue. You know, America was founded on the concept of the pursuit of happiness. And I think that that is a fundamental flaw. You cannot, well, you can pursue happiness, but you can never find it. Viktor Frankl put it best: happiness and success ensue as the unintended byproduct of a quest and a devotion to a cause which is bigger than one is. It's always a byproduct.
Hmm. Viktor Frankl's book was an incredibly stirring book. Man's Search for Meaning. So my grandparents went through the Holocaust. He spoke about how you've got this last of human freedoms, which is between the time those Nazi captors do whatever they're going to do, debase, attack, humiliate your body, and you reserve the freedom to choose how you're going to respond to that. You know, death is a theme that came up actually in your class, and it's never really come up in a structured program I've been a part of before. A lot of people seem, as I've spent about 20 years since your program, to start considering some regrets as they get closer to death. And you hear about not giving as much love as they'd like, not getting as much, not taking enough risks. What are some of the things you've seen people approaching death come to realize?
One very common thing is a great deal of what I have been preoccupied by was actually worthless. And that is no longer a belief, it is a realization. It comes home very, very, very strongly. There's a parable that I use to illustrate this. I don't know if I used it in your class or not, but I'll share it with you now. So there was an archaeologist who had heard about this great king who had discovered the secret, the ultimate secret of life. And he did a lot of research and found out that this ultimate secret had been inscribed. And it was a piece of parchment which the king had. And the king disappeared, and the kingdom disappeared, but he was able to find out where the kingdom was. And he went there, and it was covered over, but it was undisturbed. So he set the excavators to work, and sure enough, the palace came, and then the king. And then there was the tomb of the king, and they opened the tomb, and there was the king, and there was the parchment. And the parchment was actually between the radius and ulna of his right hand, of his right arm. You know, the body was now a skeleton, and the skeleton had broken apart, but it was still within the coffin. And he picked it out, and he smoothed it out, and he deciphered it. And what the parchment said was, as you are today, I once was. As I am today, you soon will be. Reflect on what you are striving for and why. That is remarkably profound if you think about it. As you are now, I once once was, as I am today, you soon will be. What are you striving for? Shakespeare said it beautifully. Imperious Caesar dead and turned to clay might stop a hole to keep the wind away. When you start really pondering that, when you can broaden your perspective to encompass decades rather than days or months, you find that you might want to take the arc of your life and point it in a somewhat different direction.
I'm going to hazard a guess here that visionaries who set the vision for their organization are also good at setting their own vision if they choose to. And you used to encourage us to journal, to get clear on where we wanted to head, what was on our minds, basically becoming more aware of the forces that guided us and of ourselves. What are some things you recommend people do to set their vision, a worthy vision?
Focus on an inward journey. Who am I? Am I comfortable being the kind of person I am and growing in the direction that I am growing? Am I every day more congruent with my beliefs and my values? All of us are incongruent to greater or lesser extents with what we believe or what we profess to believe. I like to believe that I am a concerned citizen and I have care for the environment. I also like long hot showers and I travel extensively and I fly often. The two are incompatible. I recognize that they are incompatible. I don't sweep it under the carpet and say, okay, this is one area where I'm incongruent. Every day as you go through life, become aware of the ways and the means and the manner in which you're incongruent and try to go a little bit more towards being congruent. And as you do that, your life transforms and your experience of life transforms.
Mm-hmm. So we're incongruent somewhat with ourselves, but we're also somewhat incongruent with others. How much energy should we put into trying to change others?
Let's put it this way. Persons have a presence and a force field. When you're with certain persons, you can feel their intensity. And when you have important people or persons who think they are important, it is like a palpable force that you can sense. When someone is edgy, someone is anxious, you can feel it, you can sense it. The challenge for you always is, am I going to let this person's force field, this person's anxieties, am I going to let that take me away from my place of stability and equilibrium? Or am I going to be rooted so strongly in my sense of stability and equilibrium that the other person is going to come to me and come along my path? It always boils down to that. When you are completely rooted, you will find that you have a calming influence which rubs on others. And this is something you can empirically observe. Have you ever been in a situation where everybody is nervous, anxious, and things are going to hell? And a manager or a senior leader comes in and he says, oh, here's what we do about it. And he's so calm and so self-assured that all of the panic leaves and you get down to do what needs to be done. Your job is to be that person. Your job is to be so anchored in the knowledge that things are okay. Yeah, there will be ups and downs. There will be reverses. You'll deal with them as appropriate. But there is no need at all to get anxious, nervous, worn out. So each day is your journey to being more anchored in that, so that other people don't take you away from your place of calm, but you are able to bring them into your place of calm. And believe me, they will be much better able to deal with whatever is going on in their life from that place of calm to which you have taken them.
I see that at the dinner table in our home. Tell us about how you meditate.
I used to meditate regularly before the children came along, but after that, it kind of became sporadic and it is now reestablishing itself. But I would like to leave you and the listeners here to become comfortable with the idea that your entire life is a meditation. You don't have to have meditation only if you're sitting on your cushion or a chair and saying, I am going to meditate. Your entire life can be a meditation, and that's what I encourage these days. Do things mindfully, be aware of what is happening around you. As Ram Dass said, and this is the title of his influential book, Be Here Now. When you're washing dishes, wash the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
Here's something that I really would like the listeners of this podcast to ponder. The purpose of washing dishes is not to get them clean. The purpose of washing dishes is to wash the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very Zen saying, but it's very profound. The purpose of washing dishes is not to wash the dishes. The purpose of washing dishes is to wash the dishes.
You mentioned that you've gotten an unusual opportunity to spend time with family during coronavirus. You have a daughter and a son.
Yes.
How have they absorbed the spiritual teachings and the lessons you've shared with so many others?
Very good question. And the short answer is I don't know. Very often I'm surprised because my daughter or my son would say something that I've heard me say, oh my God, they have observed something and they have absorbed it. I honestly don't know. And I do know from my own experience that many things are seeds and they germinate and they sprout when they are ready. And as my children go through their life experience, some of the things that they dismiss out of hand may start making sense. It's happening to my daughter now, especially as she's become a mother. Will it happen to my son? I hope so, but who knows? Maybe I'll never know, and that's okay. Because I believe, like Khalil Gibran, your children are not your children, they are expressions of life who just happen to come through you, not from you.
So, can I share with you an example of something
Sure.
I dismissed? Dismissed would probably sound harsh, but one of our programs you were planning to miss because I think your mom was in her later stages, and you wanted to be with her while she was um,
Ready for the
uh,
transition, yes.
ready for the transition. And you mentioned that she was fasting for an extended time, and that struck me as so peculiar. I couldn't really assimilate it. Something grabbed me at some point about that notion of fasting and its connectedness with the sacred. And I do monthly 3-day fasts now. And it's something that's so powerful in connecting me with so much the outside world, my inner world, my senses, ideas that are just at a different level, completely along a different wavelength, it would seem, a level of creativity that's hard, if not impossible, to access otherwise. Can you say a bit about the role fasting has, whether it's with your mom or more broadly, and why it's so powerful?
Fasting sharpens your senses. Most of us in the West eat too much anyway, so we overload our digestive system, and fasting kind of gives us the time to come back. But more important, psychic energy flows better through a body which is at least some of the time not occupying its vital energy in the process of digestion. You become more alert. In traditional India, it is a custom to fast twice a month on particular days of the lunar cycle. And I happen to think that that is a wonderful practice. honored now more in the breach than in the practice, but I think that it is probably has sound medical benefits.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not something that I have studied, and I'm by no means an expert on it. I can just say from experience that it probably is good. Intermittent fasting, by the way, is now not quite a fad, but it's become more popular. And many people can testify from first-hand knowledge of how their body feels when they indulge in that.
Yeah, I think that basically amounts to skipping breakfast for a lot of people, and it does seem to shift their sense for healthfulness. I don't know that it has a big impact on their self-awareness. I haven't gotten that from people. Who's had an impact on your life as alive, in the flesh, mentor or guide?
One person who's still alive is Michael Singer. His book, The Untethered Soul, and the Surrender Experiment, which you referred to earlier, is, I think it's a wonderful book. In fact, I made a trip to Gainesville, Florida, purely to meet Michael Singer. And he generally doesn't receive people, but I'd sent a copy of my syllabus before. And he did, in fact, courteously meet with me, and took me around his old offices and so on. We spent half a day together, and that was really wonderful.
It's a very powerful book.
Yes, it
Did
is.
you gain something from being with him that didn't come through the books themselves?
Not clear. I do know that we talked about many things, and my understanding of some things became a little bit clearer. It wasn't anything that I didn't know before, but it just stood up in sharper focus. But it was just good. Michael
Yeah.
Singer is what I would call satsanga, in the sense of the company of certain people takes you automatically, takes your mental energy in a particular direction which is conducive to your understanding the higher truths. And he certainly is such an individual.
I can only imagine, because his book achieved that mightily.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that his his in the flesh presence did that by another order of magnitude, well, that's pretty powerful. Um, so he's a bit reclusive now. You mentioned as you're getting older, pushing up in years, you're also planning to withdraw a bit, and that's curious. You mentioned it's fairly traditional amongst uh, people from India to do that. Say a bit more about that.
No, it simply happens that a lot of the things that I used to do, I find that I no longer wish to do. Like, for example, if a top business school were to say, come and teach my core, teach creativity and personal mastery, I probably would decline. At one time, I was glad, as you know, I've taught CPM. That's what we call creativity and personal mastery at many of the world's top business schools. I taught it at Columbia, at London Business School, at Kellogg, at Berkeley, at Imperial College. But I can clearly sense that those days are gone. I will not teach it in such a setting again. I now offer those courses live, and that has come to a stop because of coronavirus. And will it resume? Not sure. I am still teaching it online, and will I be doing it for long? I don't know. I do corporate programs, and I do elite, high-end coaching for individuals who I very carefully select. First, they do their own screening before they come to me, and then I do my screening and decide, do I want to work with them? And if the answer to both is yes, then I coach with them. And they're all persons who have a very different take on life. They're all entrepreneurs. They all want to do very well. In the words of Steve Jobs, they want to leave a dent in the universe. But they want to leave a dent in the universe not for its own sake, but because that is their path in life. And their spiritual growth comes from their effort to leave a dent in the universe. To the best of my knowledge, there is no one who is dedicated solely towards helping such individuals. There may be, I'm just not aware of them. But those are the individuals that I work with. Because I operate on the principle, Josh, that the only thing you ever do in life is you work on yourself. The universe gives you many tools: your career, your family, your children, your business. But these are tools. And in your effort to be the best husband you can, the best father you can, the best entrepreneur you can, in your quest to help people in your circle, to help entrepreneurs benefit from conversations like the one that we're having, what you're really doing is you're working on yourself. These are all tools. Everything given to you in life is a tool. Your body, your relationships, your parents, everything is a tool. You use the tool skillfully, but in the process of using those tools skillfully, what you're really doing is you're working on yourself. And if you really embrace that idea, you will find that nothing ever phases you. You try mightily hard, but your business fails. Hey, that's okay. The real purpose of the business was to help you work on yourself, and that work has happened. So whether or not you reach a particular outcome really doesn't matter. It requires considerable emotional energy to be fed into that idea before it becomes you. But once you're comfortable with that, you become incredibly resilient. And paradoxically, the more you're not hung up on achieving a particular outcome, but the more you're ready to roll with the universe when it shows you a different path, the greater the likelihood that you will actually get to the goal that you set for yourself. Paradoxical, but that's the way it is. When you're detached from the outcome, you enjoy the journey and you're more likely to get your outcome. Look at a negotiation. Do you recognize you're never in a stronger position in a negotiation than when you're genuinely prepared to walk away?
Mm-hmm.
Think about that for a moment. You're in a negotiation, but you're genuinely prepared to walk away. You're never in a stronger position than then, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Works the same way in life. You have an objective, you have a goal, maybe it's an ambitious goal, you try very hard to achieve the goal, but it's perfectly okay whether you do or you don't. And when you're in that position, you find that you enjoy the activities that you have to undertake in order to meet the goal, you enjoy the journey, and you're more likely to reach your goal.
My universe and the people you focus on as well are entrepreneurs. A lot of them are visionaries. They like to get outside their business, get outside their four walls, explore big new ideas, take some risks. They like to do R&D out there, build big relationships. They tend to love culture and shaping their culture. But a lot of them get drawn into the kinds of things they don't love, the day to day, making sure the trains run on time, crossing T's, dotting I's. Well, if these visionaries accept things that they don't like, suffice to say, so many others do as well. Why do you think so many people accept things they don't like when they don't have to?
See, what happens is life deals us a hand. And very often when you meet it with dislike, it's because your mental chatter is getting in the way. Why do I have to do this? I don't really like doing it. I don't want to do this. I could be doing something else. Something else is so much more pleasant. It's your mental chatter speaking. When you become aware that it is your mental chatter, when you stop identifying with the mental chatter, you can simply let that go on, but it does not have any impact on your well-being. And then when you actually get down to doing what it is that you have to do, you find that it is no longer distasteful. Even the most distasteful task you have in front of you, if you simply go ahead doing it and don't associate with the mental chatter with which it is linked, you'll find that it's no longer unpleasant and might even become pleasant.
So I went on this journey a long time ago with you, and I've stayed on it, but not religiously every day. And you spoke of something called a catalytic mechanism, right? That simple thing that can make a big change. What's a catalytic mechanism for me, for others, that can help us stay on this path and perhaps continue ascending in this path of self awareness? An exercise, a tool, anything.
The most powerful exercise I have come across is always ask the question, who am I? Who am I really? And when you do that, a lot of what you have built around yourself falls apart. All of your ego constructed sense of self drops when you ask yourself, who am I? I want to strive. I want to build $1 billion company. Who is it who wants to build $1 billion company? And if you're constantly questioning the who am I, you'll find that the painful edifice that we have constructed starts disappearing, even crumbling.
Mm-hmm. When you ask that question, do you do it silently? Do you ever do it in conversation or through journaling?
Speaking for myself, it's always internal. I do not bring it up in conversation. You will find, and your listeners will find, that the kind of topics that we covered today do not come up in regular quote unquote conversation. And most people don't have a clue of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, if you're anchored in that, you will find that persons come into your life with whom you can have such discussions, but they will be few in number. And you ought to cultivate those relationships assiduously and with great care, because
Mm-hmm.
it's with the people with whom you can have such conversations that your growth will come. The Buddha had it clear a very long time ago, and I had it clear even before I taught my course for the first time, and that is, my course will spawn a community. The Buddha's notion of the Sangha was, there are times when you're growing on your path of self-awareness, when you will be dispirited, when you will be shaken up, when things happen that bring you down. In those times, there will be a shoulder for you to lean on. There are other times when you're strong and full of energy, and in those times, you will be the shoulder for others to lean on. That's the power of the Sangha. And I always had in mind, even before I taught my course for the first time, that my course will spawn a community. In fact, I mentioned it in the syllabus.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it's happened. We now have a global community. I have members on all 6 continents. We meet every year. This year, today, as a matter of fact, we just canceled the meeting because of coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
But we will have a meeting next year, all going well.
I'm sorry to hear about that conference getting canceled. Coming back to this question of who am I? How do you answer that question when you ask it of yourself?
This is not a trivial question. When you really go down to who am I, and you can go even deeper, who is the person who is endeavoring to find out who he is? When you go down that, you find an entity which is beyond sex, beyond race, beyond religion.
I like to imagine a fair number of people ask themselves this question, who am I? Maybe with nowhere near the level of depth you're asking yourself this question. But then what happens? Monday morning rolls around. They throw on the hard hat, punch the clock, go into work, and it's like they put this facade over themselves. Why do people do that? Why are so many work cultures lame?
What happens is we wear masks, and we have no idea how much energy is taken up in setting up that mask and maintaining that mask. And when you can put down that mask, there is a tremendous relief, because we're no longer wasting all that energy putting up this mask. This mask is here is how I would like to be perceived, and we put it up and we maintain it. And the funny thing is, we don't have a clue whether it's working or not. I have this mask, and here's how I want to be perceived. And I don't really know whether I am being perceived the way that I would like to be perceived. I think I am, but more often than not, I'm mistaken. And when you drop that mask, there is tremendous relief. But there is also reluctance because of the conditioning that we have been subject to our entire life. We're all a product of the messages that we have received. Many of them are subliminal messages, but they're all around us. From people, our parents, our teachers, our coaches, our friends, from the media, from advertising, all over. We have been consistently brainwashed over decades.
Mm-hmm. If you were helping a leader of a company get people to drop their masks and open up more, what would you tell them to do?
Don't actually try to get them to drop the mask, because many of them might not be able to handle the consequences of dropping their mask. Because sometimes it can get ugly. But if I were advising a leader, what I would ask them to do is be an inspiring leader. Now, you got to understand that I have a different take on being an inspiring leader. In my early days, when I had a public speech, I would ask the audience, how many of you want to be an inspiring leader? As you can imagine, everybody would put their hands up. But then I'd say, if you want to be an inspiring leader, you're already pretty well advanced on the wrong path. Because when you say, I want to be an inspiring leader, what you're really saying is, I want people to do what I would like them to do, which perhaps they don't want to do. So I've got to figure out how to make people do what I would like them to do when they don't want to do what I would like them to do, which means how can I learn to manipulate people? I'm being deliberately provocative here, but there's more than an element of truth in what I'm saying. So my take is, if you really want to be an inspiring leader, don't try. Don't try to be an inspiring leader. Instead, be personally inspired by a vision which brings a greater good to a greater community. And you have tremendous flexibility in defining both the greater good and the greater community. But when you find something which is bigger than you are, to which you can subsume, if not your whole life, at least a big chunk of it, and you learn to communicate that vision, then you become an inspiring leader by default, because whoever comes in contact with you cannot help but be inspired. It's like Gandhi when he was setting out to do his work in South Africa. He never said, I want to be an inspiring leader. I want to have millions of people follow me. He said, the passport laws are unjust and I will not let them stand. And he was a British trained attorney, so had verbal fluency, and he used whatever skills and talents he had to mobilize support for the passport laws are unjust and I will not let them stand. And in that process, and the process of fighting colonial rule, when he returned to India, he did in fact become an inspiring leader. That happened by default. So in answer to your question, what would I tell a leader? What I would tell a leader is, be personally inspired, learn to communicate your vision. And when you're effective in doing that, you will become an inspiring leader by default. And to the extent it is appropriate, your followers will put down those parts of the mask that are not compatible with their effort. But don't try to get them explicitly to drop the mask, because some of them may not be capable of handling the ramifications of that. You don't have to drop all of it. You just have to drop enough of it that it helps you in the tasks that you have set for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the job of an inspiring leader.
Now, part of your work goes beyond personal mastery and into this realm of creativity. What tools can you suggest for tapping into our creativity?
I believe that people are inherently creative. And even the people who will tell you, oh, I don't have a creative bone in my body, they are creative. And the way to unleash creativity is to have a deep caring for what you do. When you really have a deep caring for what you do, you'll find that creativity emerges spontaneously. So I don't spend a lot of time teaching people to be creative, and especially people who don't believe they are creative. But I do get them to explore ideas which they are uncomfortable, and as they recognize these ideas, these models which I held are not serving me well, and as they adapt and adopt new mental models, they become creative automatically. It's an organic process. The way to become creative is not strive to become creative. The way to become creative is to recognize what are the factors that are blocking your natural creativity from emerging and dismantling those. And the biggest single factor that blocks your innate creativity are the mental models that you hold on to rigidly. And all of CPM is devoted to helping you identify those mental models which are not serving you well and replacing them with better ones.
Let's steer toward wrapping here. Who do you look to now as a thought leader that people could experience transformative benefits from, whether as speakers, writers, or otherwise?
One person I respect very deeply, and we both met this person at the same time, or very close to the same time, is Marshall Goldsmith. He's renowned as a coach, but even more than his success as a coach is his underlying philosophy of life and his keen perception. He has an incredible ability to cut through the bullshit, if you will, which we all surround ourselves with. So I found that I've gained a great deal from interactions with him. Another whom we also met, I believe he was a guest speaker at Columbia when you were there, was Ben Zander, part of
Oh, with
the watch.
a thunderous roar from our class, we move people.
Another person. Mind you, these are persons that I've learned a lot with, and I respect them. I would not say that they were persons who I consider my spiritual guides, but I would consider them as deep thinkers who contributed greatly to my understanding of the mechanisms by which the world works and how you can be more effective there.
Tremendous thanks. And for everyone listening who wants to learn more about you, they can go to the RaoInstitute.com. They can go to Twitter, twitter.com/Srikumar Rao. On
Yes,
YouTube, you have a channel, the Rao
I do have
Institute.
a channel, the Rao Institute channel, yes.
And there's a book, Happiness at Work. Srikumar, tremendous thanks.